All right. Welcome to Promoting Active Learning Online, Strategies and Benefits. My name's Eric, and like I said, we have our co-host Sarah in the corner. Sarah's going to just help me fish out any questions, or if the hands go up and I miss anything, Sarah can guide me back to the center gently. All right. It's something we hear a lot about in graduate school, for example. It's something we may encounter in certain classes in graduate school, where certain professors integrate this learning, and some of us may not understand as much of it. Some of us are instructors and use it all the time, and some of us are learning to be instructors and want to add to our toolkit. Wonderful. So here's a definition of active learning from Bonwell and Asen, who are kind of landmark scholars in the field. I wanted to also celebrate that there's also a lot of female authored scholars as well that have been building on active learning integration in our classrooms. Okay, so just in a nutshell, active learning is an instrumental approach that engages students in the learning process through activities, experiences, encouraging them to think critically, solve problems, and apply their knowledge actively. Okay, those are 5 elements. Okay, it contrasts with traditional passive learning, where students mainly receive information through lectures or readings without much interaction or participation. Okay? So to frame it, the importance of active learning in higher education is very central to this conversation because it's one of the most important pillars where we can not only engage students, develop their strengths as scholars and writers, and also help them develop personally and professional skills, okay? Because those 5 pillars, right? Thinking critically through activities, experiences, and solving problems cannot always be done through a traditional lecture style, right? Okay. We're also going to talk today about what are the goals of promoting active learning, right? Why is it important when we develop our syllabuses, when we develop our LMS Canvas, when we reflect on our teaching philosophies? How are our goals being promoted, and how are we promoting active learning? Okay. Let's see. Yes, like Sarah said, what is active learning to you? How have you engaged that in a graduate setting, in contrast to what you do professionally? Okay. Fantastic. Okay. Wonderful. So here's an infographic that I pulled from Arizona State University's School of Education, which I think is a really important infographic to understand how people learn. Okay. I think what's really interesting is if we start at the bottom of the pyramid, right, you can see this really important data that 90% of students remember what they do. Okay. 70% of what they say and write. Okay. So you can see right across from that, that those 5 pillars are being really pointed to, that thread, that yellow thread. Why? Students are able to analyze, define, create, evaluate, right? And then we look at the lower percentage. So 10% only remember what they read, right? So 20% of our students only engage and remember those lectures. Okay. So at the top of the pyramid, you see more passive learning, right? Passive learning techniques, um, where people are able to demonstrate and apply things, but to the deep learning that we're trying to do in graduate school and online, it takes engagement, it takes working across disciplines, it takes group work, it takes developing your graduate students not only personally, but professionally. Okay, so modeling for them, how does one analyze? How does one define before you critique, for example, right? So understanding what a theory is, right? Analyzing that theory and then critiquing it, right? That takes learning, not just critiquing something that we don't understand yet. Okay. So some of the benefits of active learning that I've experienced as a graduate student and that I've taken away from some of my teaching evaluations specifically are improved student engagement. For example, students are less likely to miss class. They're more likely to reach out to their colleagues in class. Okay. They're more likely to do check-ins with us. They're more likely to ask for academic accommodations. Okay. They're more likely to understand that they have many resources on campus, not just an instructor, right? It's been proven that another benefit is better knowledge retention, right? As that infographic shared with us, graduate students take knowledge away by doing things, applying their knowledge, right? You have students who are more likely to matriculate, right? To work across fields, right? And most importantly, like we spoke about in that pyramid, it's helping them develop critical thinking skills, right? Um, with those models, we're demonstrating to them how to critique and how that works. Um, not just, like I said, critiquing something, but knowing that you have to read the theory, you have to understand that, and then you have the tools to critically critique, right? That there is kind of a process where you come to with that. Okay. Types of active learning that I've engaged with at CGU, and I hope a lot of you have as well, are group discussions in class, problem-based learning, right? Let's say like a wicked problem, like Professor Shamani would have developed, right? A wicked problem that you work with a team on, right? Case studies, right? Looking deeply into the significance and meaning of a study, understanding how that study is designed, okay? Simulating, allowing students to visualize things similar to that very simple triangle of information, right? Helping your students visualize their data or their study, right? Helping them do that with groups, right? Letting them present together, letting them present in class, right? Letting them do gallery walks, okay? Letting them sit with each other, right? Helping them learn to feel comfortable with that setting, right? And modeling that behavior, right? So an example is when you're doing, let's say, a syllabus for a student, showing them what you've done, right? Here's my example, right? Simulating that for them. Showing them the process of building, kind of like with a cook, with when you're cooking something, showing them the ingredients that it takes to build something, taking the time to do that. Okay. Strategies for implementing active learning. This is really fun. And I do want to hear from you all, either best practices that you think or practices that you use in your teaching today. Some of the strategies that we use are flipped classroom model, right? We like to kind of backward design the way our students engage the class and material. Okay. We like to use technology, right? If you're in a classroom, you want to have an active learning board or a digital classroom. Okay. And you're always incorporating real world examples. Okay. One of my favorite things to do, and this is an example of that, is when I teach in person, I love to have students, let's say, analyze three or four texts, and I like to help them put those on paper. Okay. Put that on the board. I like to stand up. I like for there to be energy in my classroom. And I like for my students to see me helping them make connections. Okay. Doing the work that they need, filling that gap for them, helping them triangulate tough questions or tough ideas. Okay. And then recapping those ideas for them, right? So that there's something that they can take away from their discussion, right? There goes my balloons. Anything physical, what did Charmaine say? Anything physical and or tactile, moving around, manipulating items, etc. It's a great idea. Charmaine, is this for K through 12 or is this more higher ed focused or both for you?
Okay, hoping this works. Hi. All of the above. I teach high school seniors as well as college freshmen at PCC. And in this day and age of technical everything, if you can get them up and physical, as you were saying, and it also creates energy. If you can get students up and moving around, it depends on the what. Everything can be acted out. Even a math problem or a science problem can be acted out with enough scaffolding. Manipulatives of any kind. I do English, so that's not my strong suit. But just even I've found that things like the in-class escape room things, they can be ratcheted up or ratcheted down depending on the level that you're looking at. And students love them. Students love being, as much as they're addicted to their phones and to their devices, they love to be up and moving around and stopping and changing. But it's good for them and helps them focus.
Well said, well said. And what I like to do, another thing I like to do is graduate students aren't really used to standing up in a classroom. So it's really funny when you just ask, like, may we all stand up? Or everyone's kind of going, us? You know what? And you can see that I remember when I was starting my first master's, I was so stiff, I was so scared, right? I was literally like a stick, right? And I can reflect on how much I've developed and grown as a learner. And that helps me as an instructor because I often see students who I see a lot of myself in, right? when it's their first time in graduate school. Not everyone wants to jump in the pool. And so that's where these active learning strategies are really important, right? Don't assume that our students are comfortable day one in these legacy systems. And incorporating real world examples, for example, that's two uses of the world example, are really important. So when I teach one of my classes, Introduction to Oral History, for example, when I talk about myself really quickly, I say, I am a Colombian-born adoptee, okay? And we're going to talk about, the politics of parenting, but a final paper in this class, right, will focus on women of color in Southern California, okay? So allowing your students to see, I'm incorporating a real example, right? That this instructor has a real thought, a real research agenda, right? But that also invites them in, right? It's inviting. It's inviting. Real world examples. Being genuine goes a really long way in graduate school, okay? Putting that in your teaching philosophy, okay? Helping students model that, right? Not assuming that students understand that, right? Asking students, do people understand adoption? Is that something people are people are people do people
Identify.
do people identify with that? Um, because a lot of things can be also very triggering for students. So you want to be sure that you're incorporating real world examples, but that you're also reading your room, right? So that you're also trigger warning students, right? So that would be on my syllabus, right? So that students feel comfortable. So students don't feel surprised. Kind of like this presentation. They know what's expected of you. You know what's expected of you, right? You sit and relax and learn. Well, I present. No surprise attacks. Got it? Okay. These are more really fun ones, examples. Peer teaching sessions. Having them work with each other. It could be like a peer writing group. It could be a group project, right? It could just be refining projects together, right? Having them sit with each other, okay? That is one of the biggest takeaways for graduate students, is learning from professionally everyone else in the classroom, right? Letting everyone have a moment to teach, okay? Modeling that everyone in the class has knowledge. Everyone, okay? Debates, role-playing exercises, acting out. Jonathan Aragon is interested in comedy, right? Bringing those different genres into your classroom, right? Debates and role-playing exercises, and finally, field trips and experimental learning, right? Now that COVID is over, we're able to go out places, having your students engage professionally, right? Where's the service element, right, to their teaching opportunities online? Okay, helping them with that. Oftentimes, our students are asking for help with careers, right? But in class and with active learning, you can help create easy, accessible field trips, right? That are not expensive, right? You can do things online. right? Especially in a global classroom where we have the privilege of being with students from all over the world. This is an example of using your strengths, right? Learning about different cultures, um, right? Learning how different people learn, right? Learning how different people teach. Okay, that is one of the biggest values of a global classroom like CGU. Use that. Okay, and these are some of the challenges that come and that we have to always kind of push back against. Because there's always, resistance from traditional teaching methods, right? The lecture, right? That passive learning. Uh, that can be a real challenge. Another big challenge is, let's say you're doing a lecture at a Cal State or a UC, and it's actually like 150 students, right? Not 45 like a community college or 20 like at CGU, right? That would be a very big challenge for an instructor, right? They would probably have lots of TAs, maybe 4 or 5 TAs, right? But that professor and team would have to design really actively ways that their students could take a lot of knowledge away. And finally, time constraints, right? A lot of faculty are teaching, let's say, introduction to statistics or introduction to English or ethnic studies. It's a lecture of 100. You meet once a week. It's mostly lecture style, right? Because of the amount of SLOs and expectations on the class. So at that time, you also have time constraints. You have syllabus constraints and the time. Okay. And these are challenges as you continue to educate in either private or public settings where you still want to incorporate active learning. Okay. But you're kind of thinking ahead, right? Thinking ahead, okay, this will be one of the challenges for this, but I can redesign this. I can chop it up. Okay. Challenge. And then how do I assess my active learning? How do I know that what we've developed on our syllabus and what we've done together is actually formative? There are neat ways to create assessment tools and techniques. There's also ways to ask, to gather feedback and reflection, right? There are ways you can create non-punitive tasks, right? Or check-ins with your students. You can do anonymous surveys, right? You can ask for feedback, right? You can create simple assignments that have them reflect, right? And most important, you can adjust strategies based on the feedback. Okay, so kind of when you get your mid-career evaluations, right? At that point, you can make an adjustment. For an example, last semester, I taught, and one of my biggest reflections after my course evaluations were that students wanted mini check-ins. They wanted more deadlines around large assignments, right? They wanted me to kind of help them be active in that calendar, okay? And that was really important because you have to reflect as a instructor on how much they're expected to learn, okay? But that they're looking for that support and development, okay? So that's a really important reflection, okay? So be ready to be agile, okay? Ask for feedback, right? An example is do a check-in. There's many ways to check in with your graduate scholars online, right? There's different techniques. Okay.
Eric,
Model.
can
Yes.
I'm sorry, can I share a quick comment related to Charmaine's comment and also the overall topic of active learning? Um, I'm not that familiar with other programs at CGU. I only know about the Urban Leadership Program because it's the program that I was enrolled in. But I know that our model was a cohort model for the first year and a half, 2 years. Initially, and throughout our program, we met on Friday evenings from 4 to 10, and then we were back on campus from 9 to 4. Um, Everyone in our cohort, most of them were assistant superintendents, directors. They were people that were, for the most part, in administration and K-12 settings. A couple of people were working in community college or four-year settings. But for me, I was driving out to CGU from Antelope Valley. I was leaving my school site at 12 o'clock to be there by 4, and then being on campus until 10. By the time I got to the hotel room, on Friday nights, it usually was about 11 or 11:30, and then the next morning I'm up to be back on campus by 9 o'clock. Were it not for active learning on Friday nights and on Saturdays, were it not for the professors that we had asking for feedback and then taking that feedback, and you could see the very following week that adjustments had been made in instructional delivery, I don't know that I would have gotten through. We had a cohort member that was flying down from the Bay Area. We had a cohort member that was driving up from San Diego. Um, these are very tough sessions when they're back to back like that. And I think it's terribly important to incorporate the technology. I think it's also important to incorporate some real world examples because typically in those real world examples, what we would see in our meetings is that you begin to touch on some of the things that often may be overlooked and may be a little more emotionally sensitive in terms of education and the historical context of the United States. But I think what Charmaine was saying, getting people up and getting people to move, very, very important. And the last thing I'll say is that that cultural component of movement in time and space is very important for many people. And I think that it does learning a great service to get people up and moving, get them out of their seats, get them out of a stagnant disposition.
Yeah, most definitely. Does anyone have any other comments before I share? But I really like this discussion. If anyone wants to kind of build on their experience, kind of around administration and flexibility, agility. Um, if there's things in your program that are working, let us know. Gary shared a lot about that flexibility, the
So
adjustment. Yeah.
my program, which is the DRPH program, was an in-person program. And after COVID, it was hybrid. Actually, it was fully online, then it became hybrid. And now with the new change, because they're trying to attract professionals to come to the program, now it's fully online. It's not that it's very wonderful in some aspects because I can lead as a mother of two kids, I can be home for them more. Um, you know, growing up in the 90s, my parents were very hardworking, and I did not get to have that kind of relationship with my parents. So, I mean, flexibility is really nice. It works out at the end, I guess. It's God's graceful hands, I guess. But I mean, it's very nice to have programs where you can develop as a person, as a human, and also not impact your human relationships. I know a lot of people in my programs are not even in California. So I mean, this opens up the it's a fair playground for a lot of people now. And we can learn from each other. And I think flexibility, especially in the realm and like era of online education, is very important. But again, your topic comes in big. Now we are people who just meet on Zoom. How do you make communities? How do you make this active learning in an online setting? That's where a very educated academic is needed um, to make these meetings meaningful. Otherwise, we've all had those meetings where you don't even open the camera and you don't even hear what the person's saying because it's not very interesting or they did not attract you. On the other hand, you have this person that is engaging you every 2 minutes that you're out of breath. So how do you find your happy medium from overly occupying your viewer with no flexibility? Because if you mandate people to be on camera, for example, just to grab their attention and putting them from one room to the other, it defies the reason for them to be online versus in person because now they cannot be present if a little kid cries in the room. That's like on the top of my head. That's my experience, I guess. Because I had the legacy education. I'm a dentist, so I had the in-person
Yeah.
very legacy education where things were not flexible, where things were one way or the highway, where the communities were not very healthy, and there wasn't a lot for diversity. You have to look a certain way. It's not the looks, but you have to act like a certain way and abide by the rules because it's an Ivy school and that's what we're all clones of one another. Yeah, so that's my 2 cents.
That's great. I mean, Sarah, thank you because I think we're all building kind of on experiences that we're all sharing personally, but also how we succeed, in online learning. For me, like Sarah said, it's definitely about the flexibility. I feel that you're able to accommodate more to students' needs. And I think that's a really big takeaway for me. That students now have more going on and that they can still take away a lot of learning with accommodations. And a lot of those accommodations are really important. They can be academic, they can just be they can be life accommodations as well. But that it's really important to allow your students to succeed. And I'll just say this, at CGU, one of the benefits, because classes are so small, right? 18, maybe 20 people. As an instructor or a TA, it's really easy to get to know your people. Okay, just get to know your people. Our people are learners, graduate students. Get to know them. Even online, there are ways that you can engage them. When I taught my class, I loved to send my class a weekly email. I would do that because it was my strategy to share who I was briefly, but to engage the class. Why? It was an online class. So as an instructor, I wanted a little more energy. Okay. I wanted them to feel that every week I was thinking about them briefly. Okay. And that they could think of the class briefly. Okay. What I took away from that experience is that graduate students are forming core memories around their learning. Okay. Core memories that are really important to their development, not only as scholars, but as people. Not only developing professional practice tools, but making them understand the value of this global classroom. Okay. And that takes modeling. Okay. And those are strategies that are really important, right? So get to know your people. Another thing I've gotten to learn is that a lot of my students are veterans, right? A lot of my students are of multi-generations, right? And most importantly, like Sarah said, a lot of my students are working parents. Okay, so that we must be even more flexible, right? We have to we have to be more agile to that student. Okay. Jonathan, in case it helps, here's a list of active learning strategies mapped onto Bloom's taxonomy. Thank you, Jonathan. So everyone can take that. Yeah. Jonathan, is there one strategy that you like to use when you're teaching online, for example, that differs from when you're doing it in person? Because you have so much experience.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I think everybody has their own style and what they like, so everyone's gotta figure it out for themselves, right? But for me, I think the number one thing that has worked better than anything else is just to co-create. And so it depends. It doesn't matter if it's online or in person. When it's online, I think the most important thing is to keep things technologically simple. And if some kind of technical snafu comes up, just be like, you know what? Let's just deal with it right now. Fix it right away and then get back to class right away, right? Rather than being like, I'll do it after or something, you know. But the most important thing I think is co-create. So like the two different things matter, I think, mostly for rather if it's a serious class or a fun class. So if it's a serious class, like one that's more professional, I think the most important thing that has worked for me is to come into class with a loose plan, but then be ready to abandon that plan and do whatever people want to do with their time, so that way you have some structure, but you're not bound to it, because like everything you've outlined here, active learning is where the real construction of knowledge and the understanding happens. So as instructors, I find that like I'm usually most concerned with like what do I gotta do? What do I gotta say? What do I gotta facilitate? But the students don't care about that. They care about what do they gotta do? How do they get to show what they've accomplished? How are they gonna construct it? So I find it more helpful to just like give the essentials and then like shut up and then let them do something and then let them show what they did and have accountability. So there's this sense that like whatever is what we're doing, nothing's like really a throwaway, right? We're gonna all be showing our work for whatever we did from week to week, so that it feels like there's something to be at. But when it comes to like, because the engagement really needs to be there for more serious classes. And in the age of technology, we really aren't transmitters of information anymore, right? Because our smartphones can do that. So we don't really got to fill people up with information. It's more important to be there more of in a coach role. But for a class like in the arts or maybe even the humanities, but especially I know for the arts, it's sort of the opposite, where structure is really important because it's inherently fun and it's inherently engaging. So if I teach a class on
Oh, it was getting so good. We lost him. Rats. But we'll wait. I'm sure he'll come back. My biggest takeaway was the importance of co-creating. I think that's another really important way to kind of instruct, So for example, remember teaching demos, kind of walking around if you're doing in person, kind of checking in on your student. I always liked that as a student, and I still enjoy that as a student.
So I was on the wrong side of history for a very long time. I taught for 5 years at the dental college, and I was the the lecturer that stood at the podium and gave everyone a pop quiz. That was before I converted to ethical learning and teaching. You learn. You start teaching like you were taught at the beginning, and then you go like, why do kids hate me? Well, they hate you because I can't say that in public. You know why? Do not do that. And then you start learning, and then I took my certificate in medical education, and I was introduced to the light of ethical learning, and I was like, I was abused as a student. I was abused, and now I'm not going to create that cycle again. And when I first started incorporating active learning and a more understanding teaching and like, more student-centered education, people were against it at the beginning. They were like, "What's wrong with what's wrong with the professor?" And then, yeah, one thing led to the other, and I was convinced that that was my calling. So no, I have to change everyone's point of view. Yeah. In the
Exactly.
chat, Charmaine put something really nice.
Thank you, Charlene. This is Illinois' website. Thank you, Charlene. That's incredible.
These are great tools. Sorry, my computer died. So I think my computer was telling me, shut up, you're oversharing.
It was getting so good. We really loved, Jonathan, how you used the word co-create, like being a
Yeah.
co-creator as an instructor. I really took a lot away from that. And the idea of being kind of a coach. Um, I also look at myself kind of as an advocate. I like to use the word advocate um, to also kind of look at active learning. But did you want to just kind of finish off on co-creation? Did you want to kind of say something?
For co-creation, no, I was just saying that when you're teaching a class in the arts, like something that's already more human, already more fun, it's sort of the opposite. The most important thing I found is to have structure and be professional, because the activities are already engaging, but it needs to be professionally structured. And then the last thing is that I would share is content knowledge, right? So like you're talking about, Eric, the importance of like being an advocate or being a coach and like acting as a resource person. Just knowing the content, the material, like being an expert in the subject is really important, because then it's not like you gotta do a lot. You just sit back and you just jump in when it's needed to provide whatever's needed in the moment. But if you don't have the content knowledge or the resources, that's hard to do, right? And everybody might start there. Sometimes you're offered to teach a class and you accept, and you're like 8 hours ahead of your students, like brushing up on matrix algebra or something like that. And they're like, I got to figure out how to do a lecture on this. But after you teach matrix algebra for like 5 years, then you can sit back and play the advocate coach role.
Mhm. Mhm. Very well said. Very well said. Content knowledge. I think we've all been students where we felt uncomfortable in a classroom because there was none of that. So let's bring school back. Let's bring knowledge back, right? And let's challenge ourselves to co-create that knowledge with our graduate students. One thing I reflect on frequently when on at CGU for the online classes we're doing is how do we get more engagement? How can we constantly change and be agile to almost every module? How can we continue to make accommodations? And then I sit back and say that the engagement that they're sharing is the engagement that we have to be learning how to analyze, right? And like Sarah said, a lot of students don't need the camera on, right? Because they're using chat, right? Or they're communicating in different ways with us, okay? Another thing I think about a lot is how do we get those who maybe aren't as engaged to participate? And I think a lot of those go back to some of our constraints, right? We only meet once a week, right? These are all working graduate students, right? It's at 5 p.m., right? People are feeling a little exhausted from their day. But that you must carry on, even if the camera is not showing you that student, that they are being active, right? And that we can't assume that they're just being not active by not seeing the camera, okay? But asking them questions, trying to put them in groups. I think it's always students expect us to be also active educators. And so what we're modeling for them is not only are we actively engaging them, but we're trying to be active learners ourselves. And that takes adjustments. But that we have to give our students that grace, right? Okay. And one of the things that I love to do, I think you've all seen it in my class, is I like agendas. Okay, I like my students to feel comfortable. I like them to know what's expected of them and what we're going to do in the day. Okay. Let's see what we have here. Jonathan, the best thing I can do to be replaced by AI is to do my best to teach like a robot. And for sure, a robot will do it better. Yeah, it's true. It's true. I really liked what Jonathan said as well about keeping things simple when you're online. This is it's a lot for a student. They're not in person. They're just focusing on this thing. Keep it simple. Be honest. If there's an issue, tell them. Resolve the situation. Don't make it more stressful for them. They're already logged on. Okay. So yeah. So with that, it's a 12:57. I wanted to see if anyone who has not shared would like to share. But I'd like to thank you all. One of my biggest takeaways was the importance of discussing what active learning is with people in graduate school who teach at different levels. Some of them who are already getting their dissertation, and that we should be constantly learning, like all of you have shared. So thank you for sharing your personal stories and why you're here. And I hope you had a little fun.